Before your next breakfast, I want you to do something for me. Think back to how you felt after your last morning meal. Not while you were eating it, after. An hour later, maybe two. That quiet dip in energy that arrives before the morning is even half over. That creeping hunger that should not be there yet. That pull toward something sweet, or a second cup of tea with sugar, or a biscuit, or anything to get you back on track. Most people feel this so regularly that they have stopped noticing it as a signal. They assume it is just what mornings feel like. They push through, grab a snack, move on. But I want to suggest something to you. That feeling is not a normal feature of getting older. It is not simply what happens after 60. It is a very specific physiological signal, one that is telling you your blood sugar has already risen and fallen in a way it should not. And the part that surprises most people, once they understand it, is that this signal is almost always triggered by a breakfast they genuinely believe is healthy. The oats, the fruit juice, the brown toast, the granola, the low-fat yogurt with fruit on top. The foods sitting on the kitchen table right now that carry every hallmark of a sensible morning meal. If you are managing diabetes, pre-diabetes, or any degree of insulin resistance, and if mornings have been feeling like a cycle you cannot quite break, this video is for you specifically. My name is Dr. Julian Cross. I have spent years working with patients who are genuinely confused about why their blood sugar stays unstable despite doing what they believe is right. They are cutting sugar. They are eating what looks like a careful, responsible breakfast. They are following advice they have heard for years, and their numbers remain uneven. Their energy dips. Their hunger returns too quickly. Their morning readings are not where they want them to be. And almost every single time, the root of the problem is not lunch. It is not dinner. It is not the evening snack. It is breakfast. Specifically, it is a breakfast built primarily around fast-digesting carbohydrates. Carbohydrates that enter the bloodstream rapidly, spike blood sugar, trigger a sharp insulin response, and then drop blood sugar back down within an hour or two. And then the entire cycle starts again, over and over, every single morning, before the day has properly begun. I want to talk today about eggs, not because eggs are a miracle food, not because they cure diabetes or reverse years of metabolic change overnight, but because eggs, eaten correctly, in the right combination, in the right sequence, as part of a breakfast that genuinely supports blood sugar stability rather than undermining it, are one of the most practical, accessible, and evidence-backed tools available to anyone managing blood sugar after 60. And I want to walk you through exactly why this is the case, not just tell you to eat eggs and trust me, but show you the mechanism, the biology, the research, and the specific practical details that determine whether this approach works or whether it produces no meaningful change at all. Before we get there, I need to explain what is actually happening in your body in the early morning hours. Because the morning is not just any meal window. It is a metabolically unique and somewhat vulnerable window. And understanding that changes how you think about everything you eat for breakfast. When you wake up, your body has been fasting for somewhere between 7 and 10 hours. During that overnight fast, your liver has been slowly releasing stored glucose to keep your brain and organs functioning while you sleep. And in the early morning hours, typically between 4 and 8 in the morning, your body releases a natural wave of cortisol, your primary waking hormone. Cortisol is what helps you feel alert and ready to move. But cortisol also raises blood sugar slightly as part of that wake-up process. It is telling your body that the day is beginning and that it needs available fuel. This is sometimes called the dawn phenomenon. And what it means is that by the time you sit down to eat breakfast, your blood sugar is already primed. It is already slightly elevated compared to where it was in the middle of the night. So when you then eat a high carbohydrate breakfast on top of that cortisol-driven morning rise, the combined effect is a sharper blood sugar spike than you would get from the same food eaten at any other point in the day. The morning is actually the time when your body is most sensitive to carbohydrate intake. Eating a high carbohydrate breakfast is, from a blood sugar management perspective, the worst time to do it. and yet it is exactly what most conventional breakfast advice still recommends. This also explains why so many people who are not eating particularly badly overall still struggle with their morning readings. It is not their entire diet that is the problem. It is specifically the first meal, setting a hormonal and metabolic pattern that the rest of the day has to try to recover from. Now let me explain the mechanism more concretely, because I find that when people truly understand why something works the way it does, they are far more likely to follow through with it. Think of your bloodstream as a highway. On a well-managed day, traffic flows steadily. Cars enter at a controlled rate. Everything moves smoothly and efficiently. Now imagine someone opens a gate and releases 500 cars onto that highway simultaneously. No spacing, no traffic lights, just a sudden flood of vehicles hitting the road at once. That is what happens to your blood sugar when you eat fast-digesting carbohydrates on an empty, cortisol-primed stomach first thing in the morning. Glucose from those carbohydrates enters your blood rapidly. Your pancreas scrambles to manage the sudden surge. Insulin spikes sharply to move glucose out of your bloodstream and into cells. And then, when the job is done, blood sugar drops. Sometimes it drops quite sharply. That drop is the mid-morning crash, the tiredness, the foggy thinking, the hunger arriving far too soon, the craving for something sweet or caffeinated to get you back up again. Now imagine a different version of the same highway. Same number of cars, but this time there are traffic lights installed at intervals. Traffic still moves. Glucose still enters the blood, but the rate is controlled, manageable. No sudden flood, no overwhelm, no reactive crash. That is what protein does in a meal. It slows the rate at which glucose from carbohydrates enters the bloodstream. It installs the traffic lights. And eggs, whole eggs prepared simply, are one of the most effective and accessible ways to do that at breakfast. This is not a theory I am proposing. This is established nutritional science with a substantial evidence base behind it. Clinical studies comparing high-protein breakfasts to high-carbohydrate breakfasts with identical calorie content have consistently found that the protein groups experience lower blood sugar peaks after eating, a gentler insulin response, and meaningfully better energy stability throughout the morning and afternoon. Same total calories. Completely different metabolic outcome. A large whole egg contains approximately 6 grams of high-quality complete protein. 2 eggs gives you 12 grams of protein alongside meaningful amounts of healthy fat. And that combination is what produces the traffic light effect. Protein and fat both slow gastric emptying, the rate at which food leaves the stomach and enters the small intestine, where glucose absorption occurs. When gastric emptying slows, glucose absorption slows. The blood sugar curve flattens. The insulin response becomes gentler and more proportionate. Eggs on their own, without toast, without juice, without cereal alongside, have essentially zero glycemic impact. They do not raise blood sugar. They do not trigger a spike. Their natural composition is protein and fat, which means they digest slowly and provide a stable metabolic starting point rather than a rush and a crash. There is something else about eggs that I want to spend a moment on, because it is relevant to how people over 60 feel in the mornings, not just to their blood sugar numbers. Eggs are one of the richest dietary sources of a nutrient called choline. Most people have never heard of it, but the research behind choline is genuinely compelling. Choline is what your brain uses to produce acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter heavily involved in memory, focus, and the ability to think clearly. A single egg contains approximately 150 milligrams of choline. 2 eggs gets you close to the daily requirement for most adults. The reason this matters specifically at breakfast is that your brain is in a mildly depleted state first thing in the morning after several hours of fasting. It is working immediately when you wake up, managing attention, processing information, navigating the beginning of the day. What you feed it in that first hour either supports that function or competes with it. A carbohydrate-heavy breakfast that sends blood sugar spiking and crashing does not give the brain what it needs. Eggs, by providing stable fuel and choline simultaneously, are doing something quite different. This is very likely why many people report feeling noticeably sharper and more focused on mornings when they eat eggs compared to mornings of primarily carbohydrates. It is not coincidence. It is the brain receiving what it needs at the time it needs it most. Now let me walk through how to actually use eggs to change the morning blood sugar pattern, starting simply and building toward the most effective approach. The simplest version is 2 eggs, boiled or lightly scrambled, eaten before anything else in the morning. No toast alongside, no juice, no cereal first, just the eggs. This alone, for many people, produces a noticeable difference in how long they stay full and how stable their energy feels before lunch. But here is one of the most common mistakes I see. People eat eggs for breakfast, but undermine the benefit entirely with what they eat alongside or before them. They have a glass of orange juice first, or they eat a bowl of cereal and then have the eggs as a side. Or they have 2 eggs, but also 2 large slices of toast, which means carbohydrates are dominating the meal, and the stabilizing effect of the protein is significantly reduced. The sequence and the balance of the meal matter enormously. Protein must be the dominant component, not a supporting player alongside a larger portion of carbohydrates. And if carbohydrates are included, they should come last in the meal, not first. This is not arbitrary. Research has demonstrated that the order in which foods are eaten within a single meal produces measurably different blood sugar responses. Protein and fat eaten before carbohydrates results in a meaningfully lower post-meal glucose peak compared to eating the same foods in the opposite order. The practical implication is direct. Eat the eggs first. Eat the vegetables alongside them. If you are including carbohydrates, a small amount of oats, a piece of fruit, a slice of rye bread, eat them at the end of the meal, not the beginning. Now let me describe the most effective version of this approach, the combination that produces the clearest and most consistent results. Eggs paired with a source of healthy fat and fiber-containing vegetables, eaten in the right sequence, with carbohydrates positioned at the end or removed entirely from breakfast for now. Here is why this works so well. Healthy fats, like those in avocado, slow gastric emptying further beyond what protein alone achieves. When gastric emptying slows, everything slows with it. Blood sugar rises gradually rather than rapidly. Insulin responds proportionately. Energy stays consistent through the morning. And because fat is genuinely satiating, the pull toward a mid-morning snack fades significantly. Vegetables add fiber, and fiber is one of the most reliably effective blood sugar moderating factors in nutritional research. Fiber physically slows the movement of food through the digestive system. It creates a buffer that limits how fast glucose can enter the blood from surrounding food. When you have protein from eggs slowing things down and fiber from vegetables adding a second layer of control, the combined effect on blood sugar is substantially stronger than either produces independently. Think of it this way. The protein from eggs is the traffic light. The fiber from vegetables is an additional traffic management system working in parallel. The fat slows the entire flow of vehicles entering the road. Together, all 3 reduce the blood sugar response after breakfast to something the body handles comfortably and efficiently, rather than a spike requiring a major insulin response followed by a drop. The specific vegetables matter less than their presence. Spinach, peppers, courgette, tomatoes, mushrooms, kale, rocket, any of these work. What does not work is substituting bread for the vegetables. People often feel they are adding something to breakfast by adding toast, but they are actually replacing a blood sugar stabilizing component with one that works against stability. Vegetables and bread are not equivalent. In this context, they produce entirely different physiological outcomes. A practical version of this breakfast looks like this: 2 eggs, scrambled or poached, a handful of spinach or sliced peppers alongside, half an avocado or a drizzle of good quality olive oil. And then, if more fuel is needed, if the morning ahead is long or physically demanding, a small portion of steel-cut oats or sweet potato at the end, after the protein and vegetables, not as the centerpiece. When people follow this approach consistently, most mornings rather than occasionally, the changes in how they feel typically become noticeable within 2 to 4 days. Not weeks, days. Less urgency around mid-morning hunger. Energy that feels more even, rather than building and then dropping sharply before lunch. Fewer thoughts about food between breakfast and lunch. That calm, clear-headed, steady feeling that some people experience only rarely. That is what properly supported blood sugar actually feels like. And I want to address something important before we go further. The cholesterol question. For decades, eggs were associated with raised blood cholesterol and therefore with elevated cardiovascular risk. Dietary guidelines reflected that concern for a long time, and many people, particularly those managing diabetes, who already have elevated cardiovascular risk, have been specifically advised to limit eggs. If you have been avoiding them because of this, that concern was understandable, given what was widely communicated. But the research has shifted considerably on this. Large-scale, long-term studies have found that for most healthy people, dietary cholesterol does not have the direct effect on blood cholesterol levels that was previously assumed. The liver plays a much more central regulatory role in blood cholesterol than dietary intake alone, and it actively adjusts its own cholesterol production in response to what you eat. For most people, eating eggs regularly does not meaningfully raise the specific forms of blood cholesterol associated with cardiovascular risk. What is consistently and substantially more damaging to both cardiovascular health and blood sugar management is a diet built around refined carbohydrates and added sugars, which is precisely what most conventional breakfast advice has been recommending for years. I want to be precise here because precision matters. There is a small group of people, those with familial hypercholesterolemia or specific genetic lipid conditions, whose blood cholesterol does show more sensitivity to dietary cholesterol. If your doctor has given you specific advice about eggs in the context of a diagnosed cardiovascular or cholesterol condition, please have that conversation with your doctor before making changes. And if you are on medication for diabetes or cardiovascular conditions, any significant dietary change warrants a conversation with your medical team. Not because eggs are dangerous, but because better blood sugar control can affect how your medications work, and your doctor needs to know what you are changing. For the broad majority of people watching this, eggs eaten as part of a protein-forward, blood sugar-supportive breakfast are not the cardiovascular threat they were once made out to be. Now let me walk through several habits that quietly undermine blood sugar control, even in people who are otherwise making genuine efforts. The first is fruit juice in the morning. Even freshly squeezed, entirely natural juice. When fruit is juiced, the fiber is removed. What remains is concentrated natural sugar without the structural matrix that would slow its absorption. A glass of orange juice on an empty stomach in the morning produces a blood sugar response that is, in terms of speed, comparable to a sugary soft drink. People are often genuinely surprised by this because juice feels wholesome and natural. But without the fiber, the speed of glucose entry is the problem. If you enjoy citrus in the morning, eat the whole fruit. The fiber surrounding the sugars in whole fruit is what controls how quickly the body absorbs them. The second is what I think of as the granola assumption, the belief that switching from regular breakfast cereal to granola or muesli represents a significant blood sugar improvement. Most commercial granola is built around oats, a sweetener of some kind, and dried fruit. The overall blood sugar impact is often quite high, higher than most people expect. If you enjoy granola occasionally, keep portions small and always eat a protein source like eggs first. Going back to the traffic light principle, install the lights before the cars arrive. The third is skipping breakfast by default, and then eating a large, carbohydrate-heavy meal mid-morning when hunger becomes too urgent to ignore. Skipping breakfast leads to a blood sugar dip, intense hunger, and a reactive meal that tends toward carbohydrates because the body is urgent about refueling. That reactive cycle can worsen blood sugar instability over time. And the fourth, One almost nobody talks about in this context is eating speed. How fast you eat matters. Research has shown that eating the same meal more slowly produces measurably lower blood sugar peaks than eating it quickly. Slower eating also activates fullness signaling more effectively, so you feel genuinely satisfied sooner and stay full longer. The practical adjustment is simple. Sit down with the meal. Set the phone aside for 10 minutes. Chew properly. Aim for breakfast to take at least 10 to 15 minutes rather than being finished in 3. Small habit, real physiological effect. Before I close, I want to address 3 things that influence blood sugar management independent of food, and that, if severely disrupted, will limit how much the dietary changes produce. The first is sleep. Poor sleep directly affects insulin sensitivity the following day. Studies have shown that even one night of significantly reduced sleep can measurably worsen how well the body responds to insulin the next morning, meaning more insulin is required to manage the same amount of glucose. If you are sleeping fewer than 6 hours regularly, your blood sugar management is working against a real metabolic handicap every morning, regardless of how carefully you eat. The second is stress. Chronic elevated stress means chronically elevated cortisol, and cortisol raises blood sugar as part of the body's stress response. A protein-forward breakfast still helps in this context, but the full benefit is harder to achieve when the stress hormone environment is working persistently against it. The third is movement. Muscle tissue is one of the primary destinations for glucose after a meal. When muscles are active, they draw in glucose and use it as fuel, reducing how much stays circulating in the blood. Even a 10 to 15 minute walk after breakfast has been shown in research to produce a meaningful reduction in the post-meal blood sugar rise. It is one of the most effective and underused blood sugar management tools available to any adult. When you combine a protein-forward breakfast with a short morning walk, you are addressing blood sugar stability from 2 complementary directions simultaneously. The breakfast controls the rate of glucose entering the blood. The walk accelerates the rate at which muscles clear it. Let me give you a practical 7-day starting point, because I find that the most effective way to build any new habit is to make the initial change as small and as clear as possible. For the next 7 days, change only breakfast, nothing else. 2 eggs, boiled, poached, or lightly scrambled. A handful of spinach, peppers, or any vegetable you will actually eat in the morning. Half an avocado if you have one, or a small amount of olive oil if not. Carbohydrates at the end or removed for now. A glass of water before anything else. Coffee after the food rather than instead of it if possible. Pay attention to 3 things over those 7 days. First, how long genuine hunger takes to return after breakfast. On a protein and fat-based breakfast, most people do not experience real hunger for 3 to 4 hours, rather than the 90 minutes that follows a carbohydrate-heavy morning. Second, your energy level between 9 and 11 in the morning. Notice whether the mid-morning crash becomes less sharp, less frequent, or disappears. Third, the presence or absence of the mid-morning craving for something sweet or caffeinated. As blood sugar stabilizes in the morning, that craving tends to stop appearing without any deliberate effort to resist it. Its absence is one of the clearest signals that the underlying pattern has shifted. Most people notice something meaningful by day 3 or day 4. Not a dramatic transformation, a real and noticeable difference in how the morning feels. And once you have that personal reference point, continuing becomes considerably easier, because you are no longer following advice on faith. You are continuing because your own body is showing you the result. I want to close with something that I think matters as much as anything practical I have shared today. A great many people come to this kind of conversation having already tried dietary changes that did not produce the results they hoped for. And they carry a belief, quietly, sometimes without fully articulating it, that their metabolism is just difficult, that their body is working against them, that they drew a hard hand, and the best they can do is manage the symptoms. What I have seen consistently over many years is that this belief is almost never accurate. In the vast majority of cases, the body is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is responding appropriately to the signals it receives. When those signals change, the response changes, often faster than people expect. Your body is not broken, it is responding. The mid-morning energy dip, the hunger returning too early, the morning readings that will not settle, those are not signs of a body that has failed. They are feedback from a body that is telling you exactly what it needs. 2 eggs, some spinach or peppers, a little avocado or olive oil. Carbohydrates last or not at all for now. A 10-minute walk after if you can manage it. A glass of water first thing. That is where it begins. If this was useful to you, please subscribe to the channel and share it with someone managing blood sugar who has been eating carefully and still wondering why the numbers are not cooperating. Leave a comment below and tell me, what do you normally eat for breakfast? I read every comment, and your answers genuinely shape what I cover next. I am Dr. Julian Cross. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.